Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey everyone, welcome to the FigureItOutcast for January 2025. Happy New Year. I am your host, I am Adam Koralik, and I will be joined today by not one, but two, well actually technically three, special guests. Before we get to that though, just as a reminder, if you guys could do me a favor, please like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you've never done that before, as well as check out all the social media stuff in the description. We've got Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, of course, Spreadshirt, and my travel channel. But obviously a huge shout out to Patreon in particular, because this is a Patreon-backed podcast where people get early access to it by nearly a month, but they also get early access to all my videos, usually by a few days. But you can also have other special things happen, such as getting a shout out. You can, on this particular podcast, you can pick a subject or you can be on it. And that actually has happened today. We have a brand new commentator. Welcome, Lodmot.
Thanks.
On my Discord.
Hi.
Hey, how you doing? We will talk all about Lodmot in a second here, but we also have, just because it's kind of required, I guess. I think there was a contract somewhere that I missed a typo on. And anyway, so Rob is back.
2 months in a row. Aren't you lucky?
Were you here last month?
Yeah, I filled in because Abdullah
genuinely don't,
or somebody couldn't make it.
Right, Joseph.
Couldn't make it, so I filled in.
Joseph has had a string of errors that did not allow him to be here the past few times. So yeah, I remember that now. You had to play void filler, but now you just contractually.
I'm so good at filling voids.
Okay, I'll tell your wife.
Oh, she knows.
But oh, okay. Oh, good. Okay. Well, that'll be an interesting setup for our first subject in a minute here. But so remember that little joke. But before we get to that, I want to introduce more about Lodmot. So Lodmot is canonically, if you guys ever join my Discord, which is totally free, by the way, we have a lot of active members in there, as you can imagine. Lodmot is one of them. Also, obviously, a Patreon backer, so thank you again, Lodmot.
Yep.
But the server also has lore. Like, people kind of get, over time, you just kind of create stories for everybody. Lodmot's is one of the only ones that's true. He's actually the richest human being to have ever existed. What do you make, like $100 trillion an hour or something like that? I think is what we established.
Yeah, something like that.
That's cool. That's cool. So I appreciate you occasionally pitching me like $5. That's nice of you. No, but in all seriousness, yeah, no, Lodmot's a cool guy. So if you ever want to chat with him or many of the others, again, Discord's free. Link in the description. Lodmot, anything you would like to tell the people before we start in on your subject?
I don't know. Enjoy the show. And Merry Christmas.
Well, thank you.
I, for one, would like to formally welcome our new corporate overlord, Lodmot, who now owns the rights to this podcast, apparently. I believe that was the...
Yes. That was actually where I was going with this. Lodmot has purchased Figure It Out Productions for a hefty sum of $50. I don't know why I sold it that cheap, but it's not worth much.
It was 50 Canadian dollars, too, which is even worse.
I know. That's even worse. I'm an idiot. I didn't read the fine print. But no, in all seriousness, Lodmot's a cool guy. You guys might know him a little bit if you watch my videos on the regular, because he sent some stuff in over the years. Like, the last thing you sent me was normal. It was like that Genesis 6-button wireless controller I did a video on. But there was some other weirder stuff, like Mike Yeldy 95, which is like a Windows 95 port for the Sega Genesis.
Yeah.
I didn't understand what that was about. And what's your number one passion? And I think you know where I'm going with this.
8-track tapes.
Yes.
Nice.
Yep.
Lodmot is the guy who sent me an 8-track player, along with Superman the movie's score on 8-track, as well as a couple of custom ones. One that was the Shenmue score, which was actually really cool. I even made a separate video so people could just hear the score on 8-track, which sounds like crap, but it is cool that it exists. And then you had like this special Adam Koralik edition one, which I actually keep up. I don't even know if you know this, Lodmot. I keep that 8-track next to my YouTube like platinum award. When you get like 100,000 subs, it's literally next to it.
Wait, really? That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's next to it.
Oh, wow.
So I thought you'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
But anywho, so that's Lodmot. Nice guy, extremely wealthy, and also manages to purchase the rights of your life out from under you. But with that said, We're gonna go ahead and get started here. So remember we mentioned before about Rob's wife. So leading into the first subject that Lodmot wanted to discuss, do you want to pitch it the way you actually wrote it, and then how we eventually reframed it, or how do you want to introduce your subject here, Lodmot?
Sure, yeah. So the way I originally pitched it was, if you had to like name from best to worst the console makers that currently exist, like the major ones, how would you order them from like best to worst?
Right. So rather than just do a 1, 2, 3, we decided to say we're gonna play Fuck, Marry, Kill with the console companies.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that at the time anyway, you weren't limiting it to just Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo, right?
I'd have to look
Or if
back
you are,
on
that's
but...
fine. Yeah, it doesn't matter. So
Yeah.
basically, what I think we should do is we play a round of it with Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, and then you can open it up to a second round of any console manufacturer ever. How would that be? That'd be fun?
Sure, yeah.
All right, so just to get the ball rolling here, because I know Rob understands these rules. Rob, go ahead.
I have
round
fucked,
of it.
married, and killed people, so I guess that qualifies me as an expert these days.
Yes.
Okay, so modern console companies, Nintendo,
Yeah,
Xbox, and PlayStation, presumably, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody else that would count. Correct, Lodmot? Those are the three?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess we could get like pedantic and be like Amico or Steam Deck, but yeah.
It's, it's Lodmot's rules. So by his rules, those are the three. So go for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to marry Nintendo. I'm going to fuck Sony, and I'm going to kill Xbox, which breaks my heart because I think I probably play on Xbox the most, but...
Oh, okay, so I really want to hear your reasoning, if you have reasoning behind that.
Okay, so marry implies that you're going to be with this, this person or this company for the long haul. Like, you're, like, in it for life. Till death do you part.
Yeah.
So I think Nintendo is like a stable one. Don't rock the boat. It's always fun, enjoyable. Greets you when you come home with a tray of cookies. It's like, you don't mind bringing them around the family.
Okay.
Sony is the bad boy.
Oh, so it's a boy in your case.
Gender fluid. I don't see.
Okay, all right. No judgment. It's just.
Well, it's
just
not
an
like
observation.
the PS4's got a big fucking dick or something like that.
Okay.
I mean, what else?
That would explain all your recent back pain, but okay.
Yeah, oh man!
For those who don't get that joke, Rob recently had
my
surgery
PS4
because he threw his back out. Yeah, Rob recently threw his back out, and he had to have surgery for it. That's the joke. Anyway, sorry.
That's the joke.
That's the joke.
Yeah, so Sony, I do love PlayStation, don't get me wrong. I think if I was going to, just have little flings, it would be with PlayStation, because I actually don't do much, I don't do any online gaming on PlayStation 5. I really didn't on PS4 or PS3 either. This is like most of the time I'm like, when, The Last of Us comes out or Uncharted comes out, Astrobot, something like that comes out, it's a nice little like one night stand fling. The heartbreaking one is I absolutely love Xbox. I love the Xbox ecosystem. I like their support of backwards compatibility. And I think their online ecosystem is still the best. It's leagues ahead of PlayStation and Nintendo. I love playing on Series X, but I also know when when it's getting time to take old Yeller out behind the shed and put 2 bullets in its head, and it feels like Xbox isn't going to be around for much longer, at least in a format that I think us as video game retro and physical media enthusiasts that presumably we haven't really spoken too much about it, Lodmod, that we are like Xbox is going to go all digital, like probably by next generation. So it's time to kill Xbox. So all right. Marry Nintendo, fuck PlayStation, kill Xbox.
So okay. I'm gonna go second here. Lodmont will save you for last because it's your subject. I actually agree with Rob's assessment. I would fuck Sony, marry Nintendo, kill Microsoft, or kill Xbox. And my reasoning is very similar. It's like Nintendo is the girl you marry. She's relatively consistent. Sure, she's maybe not like a supermodel. She's not this big flashy prize, but she's reliable. She's consistent. Sure, you guys get in arguments from time to time, but you work out those kinds of bugs. Can she be irrational sometimes? Sure, but at the end of the day, she's been there for you forever, and you love her. You take care of her. She takes care of you. She's a little expensive, but that's all right. That's who you marry, is the Nintendo here. You'd fuck Sony, because every once in a while you look over your fence and you just see this one or two titles. You go, man, those are some nice titles on that one. And I'd really like to check those out. Nintendo's away for a bit. She's doing stuff. Maybe we just go check on how Sony. Hey, how you doing? And you get a couple games in there. She never, doesn't really mind. She doesn't bother you about it ever. She understands the relationship. You kind of, you get one by, and I know that in other times, she's maybe had a problem with my wife. Nintendo, Sony, Nintendo, PlayStation Origins, whatever. But you kind of just keep them separate, and they don't have to talk to each other. It's okay. Microsoft or the Xbox, the one you got to kill, because you used to love her. You were dating her all the time. Everything was good. You guys were clicking. There was like this big thing. Now she's changed. She seems to be addicted to crack. And she's not really living up to the way she used to be. And she keeps checking in on you, calling your house when you don't want her around. She's like, "How you doing? You want to download some stuff?" And you're just like, no, not right now. I'm just bitch, playing my Switch. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. I'm at home. And she keeps contacting you. Won't leave you alone. She's like, "You want to get rid of your disc, man?" And you're just like, "No, I don't." And so I'm not about that life. So she's starting to create problems for me. And I think she's got to go. Okay. And in all seriousness there, and you mentioned it, Rob, did you know that they no longer manufacture a disc-based iteration of the Xbox Series X?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, really?
If you go to Amazon right now and try to buy an Xbox Series X with a disc drive, you will only find used listings.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
They don't. Yeah, the only one they manufacture now is the 2 terabyte white digital one. Wow. And I would assume that was a very low key move just to try and get us in that direction. So, for those reasons, I marry Nintendo. I fuck Sony. Kill Xbox. There you go.
All right. So, before I give my answer, I'm going to preface it by saying I'm actually a PC gamer.
I also know you've been spending too much time in Canada because you pronounced it. You pronounced preface. You've been in Canada too long.
Preface, yeah. But anyway, yeah. If I had to choose, I would. This is gonna probably sound really weird, but I would marry Sony, fuck Microsoft, and kill Nintendo.
Wow.
Okay. All right, we need to hear why.
Yeah, okay. So, Nintendo to me kind of comes...
Wait. Start with the marriage. I want to know who you loved. You love... Would you say Sony?
Yeah, Sony.
Start there. Start there. Go through the sequence.
Yeah. All right, so Sony... to me, Sony is they've been around for a long time, so it's like that girl who's been with you for a long time, and she's pretty good, and she's giving a lot over the years and stuff, and she may make mistakes or not, or she may, but yeah, either way, like, she stays with you and generally pretty, like, stable, I think.
So she's also a foreign chick that tried to immigrate. So that's cool. That's a plus.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. But she was Japanese, but she kind of acts like she's not, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I particularly like Sony, like, with their controller and stuff, and I think they put out a lot of good games like Twisted Metal, Demon Souls, and all that. And like, I'm kind of like taking it a little literally. Like, I'm not great with it.
Yeah, you're trying to answer your own question. I get it.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like they got on my bad side the least out of all of them.
Okay. All right, so the one that you hate. Yeah, it is. It makes sense. All right, so then you're gonna fuck. You said Microsoft.
Yeah, I like.
Go on.
I sort of like Microsoft's recent console because, like, there was that thing where they opened it to, like, developers, so, like, you can, like, sideload things and stuff, which is cool. And they have a lot of, and the backwards compatibility thing is really nice. So yeah, I would fuck them if they were a girl. But I probably wouldn't stay with them.
Right, okay, all right, okay.
Yeah.
And you'd obviously kill Nintendo, as you said. So what's your reasoning there?
Yeah, so I feel like Nintendo is like that manipulative person. Like, lures you in with great games, but then you, like, notice, like, the Wiimote is a piece of shit, or something else, Joy-Con drift, and then you're stuck in there because you have the console, and then you have all their games, and now you kind of have to stick with them while they manipulate you further. That's kind of my...
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense, but...
No, it does. Plus, you're allowed to answer however you want. So we've got our final list there. Do you guys want to do another round with the other with 3 different manufacturers, or you just want to move on to the next subject? What do you think?
I'd be down for. I'll do round 2, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then you got to pick 3 manufacturers because we all have to play by the same rules.
So not consoles, manufacturers.
Manufacturers. Yeah.
Yes. So it would if you can choose to recycle some of them, or you can pick 3 completely different ones. It could we should do this a little faster than the previous round, but just pick 3 and Lodmod, I guess that's your choice.
Ouya, Atari, and Sega.
Ouya. Okay. All right. Rob, do you want to start there?
Oh, those are the 3 that I have to choose from.
That's what he picked. You get Fuck, Marry, Kill with the Ouya, Sega, and Atari.
Man, because I was really about to, like, talk about the long, happy marriage that I was going to have with my Vectrex, but...
No, you don't... It's not your call, man.
No, so... Okay, kill Ouya, because fuck the Ouya. Does anybody have any nostalgia for that? Were there any great games that were exclusive to that? No. Kill that thing.
The most nostalgia...
It was dead before it got out of the gates.
Dude, the most nostalgia anybody has for the Ouya is that one guy's, like, video of him depressingly unboxing it. Yeah. That's like, I don't even know if you remember that. That was like a viral video. Is this guy... That's the most nostalgia I think anyone has for that system, is just that video. But anyway, go on.
Okay, so kill the Ouya. I'm going to fuck Atari, because Atari, Atari's great as a little fling. There's nothing that I'm going to sit down and, spend a whole weekend playing fucking Yar's Revenge or Atari carts or, like, they're fun. Like, there's plenty of great games across all of their consoles. I love the Atari line of consoles, including, stuff like the Lynx. But... it's not. It's only skin deep. There's no real emotional depth to it. So you have your fun, and then you say, "I'll see you later. Catch you later sometime." Sega, on the other hand, that's marriage material. Now, Sega has some, what's the politically correct way of saying it? Mental deficiencies. Sometimes, she's not, she's not always the brightest bulb in the lamp. She could definitely be a little emotionally abusive. Sometimes really get under your skin, but in my case, at least, the Sega Genesis was my first video game console, and you never forget your first. And Same. she's like, my high school sweetheart that I'm gonna settle down and marry and live a long and happy life with.
All right, so it's interesting you phrased it that way. That you never forget your first. So, fuck, marry, kill. I actually agree with the same answers as you, actually. So I would fuck Atari, and the reason for that is, so Atari was my first video game console, but it was so much older than me, and it was, I enjoyed it, but it's kind of like, I see it as I was a little kid and I had this like really hot babysitter, who I didn't realize was, like they're just a few years older, but they're old enough that they can be my babysitter. And then they got a little older and I got a little older and we had our little fling, and that was cool. And, you hooked up with your eventual, only a few year older babysitter, but that's all that was, that was nice memories in the past. And then you saw like some of her family that came out later. One was really into cats, and you're like, okay, this is weird. I don't want anything to do with that family. But you marry Sega, obviously, because you went to school together, you grew up together, and even though she's kind of let herself go, she's a little crazy now, she doesn't really do as much as she used to, she's really into making movies all of a sudden, great. You stick with her, because you're always drawn to her, you always go back and say, yeah, bitch, I still love you. You're nuts, I love you. And you kill the Ouya, because legally speaking, it's already dead. Like, who cares? You're doing it a favor. It's like killing a chipmunk. Like, yeah, you'll maybe feel bad for a minute, but you're gonna move on with your day.
Okay,
that's it.
All right. So for me, I would obviously marry Sega, and I agree completely there. I would, between Atari and Ouya, it's kind of a weird one. Because I actually have nostalgia for the Ouya, because I actually made a game for it. So there's that. But, I would say kill Ouya, fuck Atari. Yeah.
So the same answers.
Yeah, same answers.
We have reached a consensus.
Yep.
All right. And that's a perfect note to end that one on. So thank you, Lodmot, for picking that subject. And if you guys are out there with your friends, why don't you play Fuck, Marry, Kill with a bunch of video game consoles and have people not stare at you awkwardly? Okay. So we will move on to our next subject. The next one up is from a Patreon backer whose name is Sinjeet. He is, of course, at the tier in which he gets to pick a subject. Usually Sinjeet doesn't actually have one, but in this case he did. He wanted us specifically to talk about handheld console memories we have from the 90s. So I kind of thought, like, you could just kind of tell the story of a console, because we all grew up in the 90s. I think Lodmot is the least guilty of that, but he still grew up in the 90s. So Rob, would you like to tell us, regale us with a tale of your youth?
Sure. I think a lot of people, like, if they're going to talk about their handheld nostalgic experiences in the 90s, are most likely going to go with something like the Game Boy. And while I did have a Game Boy, I was a very late joiner to the Game Boy ecosystem. I only got one maybe in like 1997 or 1998, because I really got into the Game Boy when Pokemon first came out, because everybody was playing Pokemon and trading between their systems and everything, and if you wanted to be part of that, you had to get a Game Boy. So that's when I did. But really, the portable handheld that I had as a kid was the Sega Nomad. I when I was a kid, as said earlier, Sega Genesis was my first video game console, and I loved the Genesis. I think I got it for Christmas in like 1993, Model 2 with Sonic 2 packed in, and I loved that system. I really, really did. I still do. It's probably, my third favorite game console of all time. I love the Genesis, and I bought into it so much that I ended up buying just more versions of the Genesis. My mom was working as a executive in the 90s for JVC, so I remember I had a JVC XI, which was a Genesis that also played Sega CD games and had the karaoke system. But I also, when I saw it advertised in Toys R Us, I begged and I begged and I pleaded for a Sega Nomad, because what I really wanted to do was to be able to bring my Sega Genesis games on car rides, to school, on airplanes, just like that was the dream. So I finally convinced my parents to get me a Sega Nomad, and I remember being, or at least feeling like, the single coolest kid at school. Because during recess, everybody's got their Game Boys. Maybe there's that weird kid that smells a little bad that's playing a Game Gear. But, everybody's playing Game Boys, effectively, on those zero color, no backlight screen, with these really crappy, rudimentary graphics. And I walk up and I'm playing fucking Gunstar Heroes, and I'm playing Ristar and Sonic on a backlit full color Sega Nomad. And then to clinch it, what you also did, you brought your extra controller, because one of the coolest things about the Nomad is that it could also function effectively as a Sega Genesis, in the same way that a Switch could hook up to your TV. The Nomad could. You could hook it up to your TV with AV cables, and you could also plug in a second controller on there. So I remember reaching into my bag a couple times and take out my second 6-button Genesis controller and playing Street Fighter or Hyperstone Heist, Ninja Turtles with 2-player on the recessed blacktop with my fucking Sega Nomad. That was the single fucking coolest thing that you could do for the half hour that the batteries lasted. after that, you were no longer the cool kid anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my childhood memory that I have in the 90s, was not with a Game Boy, it was with my Sega Nomad, which I still have, and I still love it.
Nice.
All right. Well, I'm glad you still have it, because that'll lead me into my story here. So when I was trying to think about this morning and trying to think about the numbers, because I don't have a great sense of the timeline of it, but I think this was like 94. So by this point I had a Sega Genesis, but I did not have, as far as I recall, I had no handhelds, but it might have been earlier. The problem is you are talking about when I was like 6, 7, 8, whatever, so I don't really remember that well. But at some point, my mom got me the original DMG, Game Boy, the original launch Model 1. Mm-hmm. And I think it must have been either 93 or 94, but I'm thinking it was 94. And I had it along with Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening, the original version of that game. Yeah. And I remember playing it a lot in one particular room in that house. And one day, I came around to try and play it, after school or whatever it was, and I couldn't find it. To save my life, I could not find it. I looked everywhere, but I had no idea where it was. Now, you have to understand, I was not a particularly adventurous kid. I didn't go outside with this thing. I didn't take it to friends' houses. I didn't take it to cousins' houses. In fact, speaking of that, I remember that's how I was introduced to the Game Gear. I remember going to one of my cousins' houses, and they owned a Game Gear. And when I saw a color screen with light, it blew my mind. And I was like, what is this? Like, it's like the next generation. But that's not what I had, regardless. Because I had been enjoying my Game Boy. I had been enjoying Legend of Zelda. Regardless, I'm looking around the house, and I never find it. Ever. And this is not a joke. Even as of 2024, 2025, I have no idea what happened to it. For the longest time, I was convinced that once I got older and started to be like, man, whatever did happen to that thing? In 95, do you remember when Game Boy did that Play It Loud series?
Yeah.
Does anybody remember that?
Yeah.
Basically, they took the original DMG Game Boy and they just made different color cases. So they had like a red one, green one, a transparent one. When that happened, my mom got me the transparent one, which I still have, to replace it. And I know that those came out in 95. That's why I'm thinking it was 94 when I had my original one. But I'm not even 100% on that. But anyway, that one's fine. But whatever happened to my original Game Boy and its game, I don't know. Because I actually still have the carrying case that came with it. I have all that stuff, just not the system itself. And I was convinced I must have put it down somewhere in the house. Within, like I hid it somewhere and I thought maybe I would find it one day. Now, if you fast forward all the way to 2022, I had a big house fire, right? Yeah. And I had been clearing out the house since my mom had passed away. And I was like, in the back of my mind, I thought there was some chance in that process I was going to find it. Didn't. When the house fire happened and we had to clear out the whole house anyway for demolition purposes, still never found it. The house is now being rebuilt. And I know with that my last chance ever of having found that Game Boy is gone for eternity. So this was like a mystery in the making for the last 30 years that unfortunately will remain a cold case. So sadly, I don't own my original Game Boy. I haven't for the better part of 30 years. But that was my original system. But I do have the one that my mother bought me to replace it. That's it.
Nice.
Lodmont?
Yep. So I actually have like two shorter stories. So the first one, I remember my first experience with the Atari Lynx was like when I was like 5 years old, and every Sunday we would go to my grandmother's house for dinner, and my older cousin, who's like 8 years older than me, he had the Atari Lynx, and he would bring it with him to her house, and we would be in the living room playing like Hard Driving, and I think Blue Lightning, I think it's called, or yeah, and I just remember having a blast on that thing. And I would always ask him, like, when we went over to her house, I'd ask him, did you bring your game system? So I have that early memory with the Atari Lynx, which is kind of weird because it's not, like, the most popular console. But
it's non-traditional, yeah.
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 But I actually still have his Atari Lynx hanging up in my basement somewhere on the ceiling. So it's in the...
Somewhere. See, that's key. That's what happened to me. My Game Boy was somewhere and then it wasn't. Anyway, go on.
But yeah, I actually have it. He kept it really nice. He had like a case for it and all the games, and I still have everything for it and everything. I haven't touched it though in a long time, but yeah. And then the other story that I have is I remember being in school, or it wasn't school actually. I think it was like this daycare. I was like 11 or something at the time, and it was around that early period of the Pokemon craze that was going on, and I didn't understand it at all. And I was at the daycare provider, and there was this one kid just glued to his Game Boy, like playing Pokemon. It was probably like Red or Blue or something at the time, but the teacher like told him, that's enough. You gotta get off the Game Boy now. And he was like putting up a hissy fit with them, and he was like trying to like keep it in his hands and like evade them and stuff, but they started grabbing it away from him, and he like threw a huge temper tantrum. And that's when it like kind of clicked in me, like, whoa, what is going on here? This is crazy. And for a while there, I didn't like Pokemon because of that reason, because I just saw what it like looked like from a third person perspective. But then I kind of got into it a little bit myself, and I fell out of it again when I saw that they were adding more Pokemon for each game series, and it was like, no, I'm out of this. Sorry. So, yeah. But,
so you basically couldn't get into it because it created crack addicts?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, like, when I was in middle school, that was when Pokemon blew up, and, like, every kid had a Game Boy, or now they had a Game Boy Light. Not the Light. What was the other one that they did?
Game Boy Pocket or Color.
There you go, Game Boy Pocket. The Light was the Japanese one.
Yeah.
Game Boy Pocket, or in some cases a Game Boy Color, and all of them, that's like all they did was sit there and play there. And I was like, this, even when I was that age, I thought Pokemon, no, I know people out there love it, and that's fine, you can love it. I didn't. I just thought it was like, wow, okay, I'm not into this. And it was creating so many people with like, I don't know, I think he's kind of right, like almost like an addiction issue. Like, man, you got them new cables, man. I need to transfer my my characters, man. Like,
yeah.
it just kind of came off like they had a problem more than anything else. So I was like, and then they were trading like physical cards and everything, and people were getting in arguments about like, do you know how many Charizards it's worth? And I was like, okay, like, I'm not into this. Like it's just whatever. That was just my take. But I remember there being this weird resurgence of Game Boy at the very end of the 90s because of Pokemon that I had never ever seen in the majority of its lifetime, which is setting our subject aside, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? If you think about it, like Game Boy, the original one, launches in what, 89, and I don't know when it officially stopped being supported, but for it to see its peak of success like nearly a decade later is strange.
The last Nintendo published game for the original Game Boy was Pokemon Yellow, and I believe that came out in 1999. So, wow. Good.
10 years
That's
later.
a 10-year peak, and Pokemon Yellow, I think, is like in the top 5 best-selling games for that system. So
I think the only one that, well, there's probably more, but like Tetris is a cheat code because it obviously came with the system for a while. But yeah, like that's insane to think about. That's got to be actually rather unique in video game history for it to like peak at the very end after especially a ridiculously long lifespan.
I mean, Pokemon single-handedly extended the lifespan of that console. Like,
no dispute.
Yeah,
no dispute at all. Has anybody got any other like short ones they want to throw at us, or are we moving on, or what do you want to do?
No further memories for me, but I do want to just state a interesting observation that Adam, for somebody who's confessed to being avowedly pro home console and very lukewarm at best on portable systems, I just would like to appreciate the fact that with your 20th anniversary DS and PSP videos recently, and now this handheld discussion, I believe you've talked about handhelds more in the past month than you have in, I think, the past like 5 to 10 years of your channel. So.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, well, if you kind of deep dive, all right, if we had a psychologist sit down and listen to this discussion, they probably would conclude that one of the reasons I didn't really develop much interest in handhelds is the first one I had, I apparently lost within 6 months, whereas my Sega Genesis and Atari 2600 never got up and ran away. So it was probably like, man, he's got, fear issues of things abandoning him or whatever. but there might be some argument there. But in reality, it's mostly down to like, it really was just like, I prefer to play this on a TV, because once I did have a Game Boy again the next year, I enjoyed it just fine until I had the Super Game Boy, and I was like, oh, finally, I can play games on a television. I don't have to look at this crappy little screen that sucks. And that's mostly what it boiled down to. And that kind of has always been my philosophy, is like, I'd really just rather play it on a television, because the portable element of it just never did anything for me. Because like as a child, I stayed home a lot, but you can call me spoiled if you want, but I basically had access to my own television whenever I wanted it. Like, my house wasn't limited to one TV, so it wasn't like, hey, you can play when mom's at work or whatever. It's like, she's going to use the one upstairs, you can use the one in the basement, no one's going to care. So you could do whatever you want. Mm-hmm. And so there was never a reason I needed to be on a tiny little dinky screen somewhere. And when we would travel somewhere or whatever, I just didn't really... I'm still like this. I don't go somewhere to play a video game. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going there for whatever the purpose is that we're going there. Like, you can argue the flight, but I think, and Rob will attest to this very personally, for me, I am not one to get bored on flights. I'm very okay and content in my universe of whatever. I can sit there and just stare at the back of the chair and just turn off. It does not matter. I've always been like that. So, like, I don't need handheld stimulation from a portable system to not go insane. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's just how I've always been. So, like when Rob and I... did we fly out of Newark to... No, we flew out of Colorado to Anchorage, right? Yeah, like, that whole time, I was never like, dude, I'm jonesing, I need to play some Switch. It was nothing like that.
Yeah, but meanwhile, it's like, I travel, maybe not as much as Adam, but a lot for my music industry job. And I always have... regardless of the length of time, I've always got some handheld in my bag. When we went to Alaska, I threw like a DSi in there. I was like, I haven't played this in a while. I'm going to throw a DS in. I
don't remember you ever playing it.
What was that?
I don't remember you ever playing it.
Yeah, well, you don't remember much from that Alaska trip.
No, that's true. That's true. I'll give you that
one. In a coma for 3 days.
For people who don't know this, there's videos on my travel channel about this, but we went to Alaska together, and I don't know all of why this happened. I think it was partially because I had an edible up there, but also, like, I had jumped around the planet so many times so quickly within the last couple of weeks before that trip that by the time I was there, I took this edible. I slept for like 3 days. So Rob can tell it better because he remembers it.
But so like, Adam was just dead to the world. Like, he would wake up, like, I would get him up for like lunch. We'd go get lunch, and then he would like go back to sleep for another 18 hours, and I just wouldn't see him until the next day. Like, it was concerning, and like there's like one time, and like I was, also a little jet lagged, because I was in Colorado on tour, and we flew to Alaska from there. So I spent some time in the hotel room, in the other bed, playing DS, just kind of like decompressing a little bit. And I remember like Adam waking up for maybe 20 seconds, long enough to be like, fuck, man, so you just take out your phone and start filming stuff for the Travel Channel. I'm like, I can't do it.
I do remember that. I remember I had the presence of mind to tell him to go film stuff because I couldn't. Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm gonna. So I leave and I go on like a 20-mile bike ride and see a moose and shit like that, and then I film it. And Adam's just like dead to the fucking world that entire time.
Yeah, that worked out really well though for the video, especially though. But the flip side of this is, if you remember correctly, or maybe you don't remember it, I woke up a couple times because you did. Mm-hmm. And Rob started sleepwalking in the hotel room.
Fuck.
So I forget what.
Yeah.
I know the first night he gets up and he's like rummaging through our suitcases, and I was like, "What's wrong? What do you need?" He's like, "I need to find our suitcases." I'm like, "They're right there." He's like, then he gets back in bed and he tells me to quote, "Go fuck yourself," and then he goes to sleep. And I was like, "Okay." And then the next night, the same thing happened. He got up. He's like, I need to find some mountain bikes. I'm like, wait till tomorrow. He gets back in bed and he says, go fuck yourself. And he goes to bed.
Oh my god.
So that trip was insane, and we've got it all on video, which is even funnier.
That hotel was one of the worst hotels I've ever stayed in my entire life. And I swear to God, it was haunted. Like, you were being possessed by like a dead Victorian child. That was like consuming your life force, and I was being possessed by a serial killer.
Yeah.
And sleepwalking, which I'd never done before.
Yeah, absolutely. But at least we know the serial killer liked to play the Nintendo DS, bringing it back around. Okay.
Who doesn't like to play the Nintendo DS?
So the only other thing I will, I guess, say is 90s consoles. Like, I do remember when I got a Game Boy Color. My mom had taken us on a trip to the American Southwest, so it's like, the Four Corners states. We're going to check out Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado. Mm-hmm. And I remember when this was, because it was 97, because Wild Wild West was in theaters. And I only remember that because during that trip, we stopped at a Burger King and I got like a little Wild Wild West toy of like Will Smith or whatever. And for some reason on that trip, we stopped into some Walmart or something. And we go over to, I don't know where we were. I think we were going into I went over to the video game section or whatever just because I was in a store and there's nothing for me to do. And I'm looking at it and she walks over and she's like, so what's all this? And I was like, oh, this is a new Game Boy or whatever. She's like, do you want one? And I was like, I mean, that'd be cool. And she's like, all right, just pick one. We'll get it. And I was like, okay. So she bought me the lime. Yeah, she bought me the lime green one and Super Mario DX color. I still have those.
Nice.
And I would play it. I played it a little bit in the RV because she had rented an RV for us to drive around in. I think, I don't know why she did it entirely. It's not like I had been bitching about it the whole trip, or I was like, I want the new Game Boy. Give me the Game Boy. I never did anything. It was more like, I think either she was rewarding me for having not been obnoxious, or maybe I had been arguing with my sister more than usual. I genuinely don't know. And maybe that was her way of like, if he's playing that, he'll shut up. You know, that type of thing. Yeah. I don't know. Unfortunately, she's no longer around to ask. And even if she was, I doubt she'd remember. But my point is, like, that's how that happened.
Yeah, I actually still have my original Game Boy Color, and it still works. So that's cool.
Yeah, good. Yeah, those things are built pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I guess we'll call it there on this particular subject. So that'll do it for this part. Moving on, though, we got a round of shout-outs. The following people are Patreon backers, and they are at the tier in which they get a shout-out. So we got a shout-out for Jeb Malcolm, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, Tim Inman, and Trey Wagner. Once again, that is Jeb Malcolm, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, Tim Inman, and Trey Wagner. Thank you so much for your support. Can't do it without you. And speaking of not being able to do it without you, Lodmot, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate you being on here. I hope you had fun.
Yeah, I did.
I'll see you in the server. Yeah, good. Hopefully we see you again in the future. If you ever want to, let us know. But if nothing else, everybody go into the server and ask Lodmot for money. Trust me, he's got plenty of it.
All right, cool.
And we're back. So, Lodmot is no longer with us. Hopefully he gets to return one day. However,
rest in peace, no longer with us.
I mean, he's resting in peace in his mansion, I'll tell you that. But anyway, speaking of that, we also have another returning champion we've got, of course. Abdullah, welcome back. How are you doing, man?
I'm fine. Glad to be back.
Yeah, always nice to hear from you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what we're going to do, you get, as always, because you're a backer, you got to pick a subject. You actually had one this time, which was nice. Would you like to introduce it?
It's been a while.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Rob's here, by the way. Sorry about that. I couldn't get rid of him.
Never left.
It's been a while since I was in the podcast with Rob there as well.
Yeah, it has been.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, dude. I've been trying to keep him away from you. I apologize.
It's okay. It works.
So what do you got?
So the subject I picked was, what cancelled games do you wish weren't, and what games you wish were cancelled that were actually released. So you kind of go both ways.
Sure.
So
do you want to start off with your answer?
Yes, I'd like to start off because all of my answers are. So I'm a Sonic fan, so I think you can see where I'm going here. So the first thing I would say is the game that I wish came out was Sonic Extreme. That was planned for the Saturn. I think this is an expected answer probably. The Saturn didn't do well in North America. It did very badly, right?
Yeah.
And I think I don't know if I'm right here or not because no one can know, but I think the Saturn would have survived a bit longer if a mainline Sonic game was there, because you got three Sonic games on the Saturn, but they're all like you got 3D Blast, that's just from the Genesis, and then you have Sonic Jam, which is a compilation, and we can't get rid of those until now, by the way. Right? It's like a compilation releases every single year for Sonic.
Yep.
But it was interesting during the Saturn days. And what else? You got Sonic R. It's a spin-off game, right? So not really a mainstream Sonic game. So it seems to be kind of like a holy grail of cancelled games to me. It looked interesting. It had, I think it was supposed to have like a fisheye lens kind of thing, if I'm not mistaken, which kind of reminds me of Sonic Lost World somehow. But anyway, the whole development of it was a tragedy. It victim to corporate mismanagement, basically.
Yeah. Have you ever played any of the?
Yeah.
Have you ever played any of the prototypes of it?
No, I haven't.
Did you even know they exist?
I didn't even. No, I had no idea I could play them. I know that they existed.
Oh yeah, you can. The prototypes. I've never played one that was like extensively completed, but it's been kind of a Saturn fan group type of thing to try and complete as much of that game as possible from recovered assets. So there are playable builds of Sonic Extreme, but the only ones I ever played were like, I see where they were going with this, but it's very uncooked. But that was years ago. I have no idea what its current progress is. But it is a thing like that's out there.
I remember it being something like Bug, that Bug platformer, like
yeah.
Is that what I'm picturing, Adam? Like kind of like not isometric, but like a
but
2.5D or
yeah. But it would, because it's Sonic, it had to move faster.
Yeah.
The character, like Bug, walks slowly by the nature of that game. But yeah, that one that boiled down to, as Abdullah said, mostly to corporate mismanagement. That was Yuji Naka, before he was a pariah, wasn't working on that game. I think that was like the first major Sonic game he had nothing to do with, which was interesting because that was a development hell story.
I think there's a whole. I don't know. There's a video.
Oh, there's definitely videos all about it.
It's like an hour-long video that describes the whole mess.
Yeah. Have you, by chance, ever heard of or seen or played Sonic Robo Blast or Sonic Robo Blast 2, I think it is?
No, not really.
So, I'm not an expert on this, but I only heard about it recently. It's like basically a fan kind of creation of it's built off the Doom engine, funny enough, and it's basically in a Sonic Jam, or not Sonic Jam, Sonic Extreme type of clone that is fan made. At the time of this recording, a dump of it that now works on the Sega 32X, oddly enough, exists. And the Saturn community seems a little annoyed because they're like, how come people would take the time to get it to run on the 32X but not the Saturn, since it's supposed to be kind of a Sonic Extreme type of game. But you might want to take a look at it because I guess it's fully playable on PC and stuff. But this would have been a separate subject, but I mentioned it in my Neptune video, but it's kind of interesting seeing this weird resurgence for the 32X. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, one thing when I thought of this question, I was curious to go on eBay and write Sonic Extreme and see what comes up, right? And it turns out that there are some on sale here of Sonic Extreme, like a cassette player of some sort. I don't know what that is. I don't know anything of it, whether it's real, fake, what's the history behind it. I have no idea. But that seems to be something physical someone can get in regards to the game if you're a collector. Overall, the thing that mainly makes this game very interesting to me is that I think people can get very divided on whether could it have been the game that saved the Saturn or not. Could it have been the Mario 64 to the Sega Saturn of some sort? Now I don't know whether that would have been the case, but it's certainly very interesting.
Yeah, I mean that's like saying for something like the Wii U, if something like Breath of the Wild, Zelda, came out as a Wii U exclusive. Like, that game
launched with it.
Was a Game of the Year, winner. It single-handedly launched the Switch into the stratosphere in terms of sales. And it did come out on the Wii U, but similar to Twilight Princess on the GameCube, it was more like an afterthought. It was just like a thank you to those who were devoted enough to actually own the console at the time. So, I'd be curious, in both of those cases if that would have happened, but maybe I'm just pessimistic. But like I find really hard, especially for the Saturn, not having that traction here in the States. That one game would have done it.
To me, it would have depended on when it happened. Like, if it had come out like towards the tail end, it's meaningless. If the Saturn had launched in '95, and ignoring all logic and reason, if Sonic Extreme was a good game that had been finished and was on store shelves at that exact same time in '95, like during the surprise launch, you might have had a case.
Yeah.
Only because Sonic was still at his peak of, Genesis success still then. And the idea that there was this new big Sonic game that, dominates, and it's only on this console, and it's only going to be on this console, and you must get it now. That might have worked. I mean, let's keep it real here. Sonic, it doesn't matter how many bad games he's in, he's still popular. Like, at the time we're recording this, the Sonic 3 movie is like destroying everything else in theaters. The fact that there is now generations of kids that know Sonic more as a movie character than a video game character is telling, but that's a separate point. It's just the notion that Sonic is a popular IP. It's what Sega has always banked on since they created him. And so the idea that Sega actually released a mainstream home console that never had a direct Sonic game, technically they did this twice if you include the 32X, says a lot. Which is just absolutely bonkers to me. But yeah, it is what it is. I do think that Abdullah's probably right. That game could have made a significant difference, but I also think Rob's right in that timing would have really mattered. It could not have been like Breath of the Wild on the Wii U, where it's like, hey, this is our last title, swan song before the console's over. The Wii U might have endured had, somehow Breath of the Wild been a launch title, because that's effectively what the Switch did. And I'm making the same case that Sonic Extreme, had it been good, had it been done, and had it been available at the North American launch, might have made the difference. Would it have mattered in Japan? Apparently not, because we didn't get it, and in Japan it was still a hit. Now, whether or not it would have competed with the PlayStation is a completely different story. But yeah, that's my take on that.
Yeah, it's a whole. You could speculate so many different, alternate history routes.
Yep.
But overall, it didn't come out, so no one knows. But I am interested now to play that. Whatever is playable of the game.
There's a prototype of it. Yeah, it's just. I mean, you can Google it. It's not some secret thing. But the thing is, you're gonna need like either a modded Saturn or something with like an ODE in it or whatever. But from last time I played it, it was very incomplete. But the Saturn fan groups are the ones that are gonna know way more about that. I don't know a whole lot about it, just that it exists because I know I've played a version of it. But the version I played was extraordinarily incomplete. It was like more like a tech demo than anything else. But I don't know what additional progress has been made over there because it's been years since I ever looked into it. But that said, getting back on subject, you also had games that you wish had been canceled. So what was that one?
That'll still be. So all of my answers are Sonic. So that will be Sonic 06. That was my definitive answer. But also Sonic Boom. So I don't know which one to pick. Sonic Boom, the Rise of Lyric one.
Mm-hmm.
Not the 3DS port, because that game was a hell of a problem. I remember it was the first Sonic game that I was really disappointed to play. That's Sonic Boom. Because when I played Sonic 06, I was a kid, so I didn't see the big problems. I just thought I was a bad gamer or something. But with Sonic Boom, no, I knew that the game was buggy. I played it, started, and I didn't even complete it. I didn't even complete it. Don't want to complete it. Whenever, just keep it as a collection piece. That's Rise of Lyric on the Wii U. And in terms of Sonic 06, that's a whole big mess. I think if it was that game, the reason I said I was in between either that or Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric is that I think Sonic 06 shouldn't have been cancelled, but delayed. But Sonic with the Rise of Lyric, no, that should have been cancelled somehow. We keep the 3DS games, that would have been much better. I think the whole Sonic Boom sort of spin-off didn't work out so well. The show was pretty good, but the whole thing didn't work out very well. And then after that, you got awful Sonic Forces and so on until Frontiers came and kind of made things a bit better. But overall, if there's a game that I wish would have been cancelled, out of those two, I would say Sonic Boom.
So, in response to that specifically, it's kind of a toss-up for me on those two anyway, because like Sonic 06 was really bad. And it did a lot of brand damage because it was such a widely promoted game across multiple successful platforms, and it really, really sucked. It was also the first time we had seen Sonic taken kind of like mainstream seriously in a while. Because, I mean, the last mainstream game he had was, I would argue, really Sonic Adventure 2 on Dreamcast / GameCube. But
Not Heroes didn't really...
No, those games were just kind of there. But Sonic 06 was like that next big one. And for it to just hit with such a thud was really damaging at the time. However, I will say that Sonic 06 has kind of had the Star Wars prequel treatment, where now it's more known for the memes and there's a nostalgia for it on that basis, which is interesting. Sonic Boom is like kind of the opposite story. It's basically like it came out and they used it to like leverage and launch an entire new iteration of Sonic, like an entire spin-off. Like Boom, as you said, wasn't just that game. It was a DS game. It was a TV show. It was a toy
was a whole
line.
series.
Yeah, they wanted a whole bunch of stuff out of it. And it's weird that they would hitch that star to a broken game on a platform that was dead. You know, the Wii U specifically. So I guess what I'm saying is, yes, that game was a failure, as was the whole Sonic Boom experiment, but clearly that doesn't matter, because now we live in a time where Sonic games are still coming out that have nothing to do with that. He's more of a movie character now anyway. So you can debate which one did more damage. I wouldn't say either of them needed to be canceled. In a perfect world, they both would have been fixed, but it's kind of hard to find a game you actively wish was canceled. Because the only reason you would want a game to be canceled is you feel like it put a nail in the coffin of a franchise you used to love. That's the only scenario to me where you'd want to cancel a game outright that actually did get released. At least as a fan. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I get your point.
So, Rob, any thoughts on this Sonic stuff specifically?
No, but I will push back on your last point. A game that I feel... the world would have been better if it was canceled. I'm going to alienate, if you do have a Gen Z or Gen Alpha audience, it's about to go away.
Well, hang on. First of all, is this just a response, or is this your answer to the original question?
It's the answer to the original question, yeah.
Well, then just go ahead and start your answer to the original question.
So my answer is Fortnite.
As game you wish had been canceled.
Yes. I honestly dislike the expectations that the success of this game has placed on other games, and the increased focus and publisher demand for live service games. I think the world would have been a better place if Fortnite had been canceled. Because even when that was released, it wasn't, you could say, oh, well, that, it was a revolutionary game because it's a battle royale game. Not really. It was not the first battle royale game. There were ones before it. There were successful ones that came out before, something like PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, PUBG. Ones that came after it, Apex Legends, Call of Duty Warzone. All of these types of games, in that battle royale genre, I think arguably do it better than Fortnite. And they also did not create this unholy homogenized sludge of pop culture that Fortnite has become, where it's tie-ins and crossovers, and it's just a sludge. It is member berries the game. It is like, I really, and I've tried playing it, I've just really, really disliked that game. And I wish it didn't exist. I also teach, teenagers, in my main job. So not having to deal with them trying to play Fortnite during my class would probably be a good thing. So that'd be my answer to the question.
Do you want us to respond to that?
Sure.
Abdullah, do you have anything to say to that?
I don't know much about Fortnite, but I agree with Rob for sure. I don't like whatever happened due to that game, but I can't judge the game itself. but whatever effect it had was very annoying.
Okay, so it's kind of interesting because I think I'm the oldest of the three of us, and ironically,
I think I'm
agree.
the older one.
How old are you?
August of '86.
Okay, yeah, you've got me beat by a couple of months. All right, well then whatever. Argument out the door. But all I was going to say is even though I thought I was the oldest, I seem like the least of an old fogey here. I'm not going to say I'm a fan of Fortnite. I'm objectively not. I think that the influences it had, I don't really disagree with Rob on any of those points, but I will look at the other side of it and say the consequences of Fortnite not existing does severely alter the gaming landscape beyond just content that they produced and inspired. It's got things like the creation of the Epic Store, like a direct Steam competitor, and all the things that they put down money to support, various indie titles and franchises and things that would never have existed without that. Basically, Fortnite money was used for some measure of good, but at the same time, I don't know if you guys ever watched Breaking Bad, even the number one drug kingpin in that show used his money for charity sometimes. So, like, I understand what you're saying. There's a lot of bad out of that organization that occasionally does good, and it's just a matter of what you prioritize. I just wanted to be more of a, let's say, neutral opinion on this. Personally, I don't give a damn about Fortnite. I don't care. I'm too old and too confused. I don't get it. I don't need to know what a dab is or any of that stuff. Doesn't matter to me. But I just will acknowledge the other side of that, which is that there was some positive that came of the success of that game. Okay, that said, what is your game you
wished was
cancel game that you do want? Yeah, no, one that you want.
Yeah, one that I want. I've got two kind of short answers, just because they're kind of short indie games, kind of in the same vein. Both were canceled within the past, like 2 years. The first one was a game from a developer called Campo Santo. They are a developer that is famous for creating the game Firewatch, which was a critically acclaimed game in maybe the walking simulator genre. Came out in 2016, I believe, and it was an incredible game. It's one of my all-time favorite games. And they, after the outstanding critical acclaim that Firewatch brought with it, the developer started working on a follow-up, a spiritual successor called In the Valley of the Gods. And In the Valley of the Gods was another first-person walking sim that would have taken place in Egypt, and you were like an Egyptologist, and the art style was absolutely incredible. I remember the game trailer was shown at the 2017 Game Awards, and I saw that, and I was in love immediately, and I was so excited for this game to launch, and it was canceled. Development was frozen on it because Campo Santo got, ironically, acquired by Valve, and as soon as that developer was acquired, Valve reallocated all the employees and resources of it to work on the creation of Half-Life Alyx, the VR spin-off in the Half-Life series. So Valve took a game that I was so looking forward to and destroyed it with their lack of foresight. So In the Valley of the Gods is one, and then the other is, if you know me, one of my probably favorite games of all time, it's a recent addition, is a game called Night in the Woods. Night in the Woods is an indie game. It's a 2D game, story-based game. It is a game that I played, and I played it again and again and again, and each time I did, I gained a greater appreciation for the writing and the story, the characters, the art style. I absolutely loved this game. And the game kind of had a tragic story. One of the developers, Alex Hawoka, ended up taking his own life. And there was some allegations involved, and it was kind of a very, very messy, unenviable situation. And the other two members of the development team, a guy named Scott Benson and Bethany Hockenberry, the other two members of this developer team, ended up continuing work on not a sequel to Night in the Woods, that would have been amazing, but a spiritual successor game, and that too was also canceled, unfortunately, after the developer Scott Benson started dealing with health issues. So Revenant Hill, that was the game's name, was also canceled after also being shown, I believe, in a Sony State of Play presentation, and it got me so hyped. So either having a game like Revenant Hill or In the Valley of the Gods revitalized and released, that would have been, still is, my answer. I'd love those games to come out.
Okay, I have no response to that. Do you, Abdullah? All right, then I will do mine. So games, the canceled game that I want, I believe I've actually mentioned it before, was before the Disney acquisition. Star Wars was owned, of course, by Lucasfilm. And LucasArts, his own internal game developer, they had hired, I think, what was it, Pandemic was the name of the developer, who did Star Wars Battlefront 1, which was a big game on PS2 and the original Xbox. And then in 2005, they did a follow-up, Star Wars Battlefront 2, it was kind of tied around Revenge of the Sith and its release date. I don't know if it still is, but at least it was the highest selling, Star Wars game ever. I love those two games to death. I cannot tell you the amount of time I sunk into them, the amount of hours. And I was waiting for years for a third one. And as we all know, eventually EA ended up with the Star Wars Battlefront franchise, which is not relevant to this discussion. But and that was after Disney, and it was a whole different thing. But I was like, where the hell? They should have made a third one of those, and they never did. Turns out they did. They were working on it. Star Wars Battlefront 3 was originally intended for release on the PS3, Xbox 360, and the Nintendo Wii, with the Wii version, of course, being a slightly different game, or very different game. They also were doing side games for the PSP and I think DS called Star Wars Renegade Squadron and Star Wars Elite Squadron. One was based on, good, one based on evil, whatever. Renegade Squadron and Elite Squadron actually did get released, and they were kind of sharing some levels and assets from what would have been Star Wars Battlefront 3. But Battlefront 3 itself, which was supposed to be released, I think, in 2008, was ultimately canceled, and I still don't really know why. Apparently the game was like 99% done across all platforms. There wasn't much left to do in it, and I thought for a long time maybe it had something to do with the Disney merger, but that was still like 4 years away at that point. So I genuinely don't know what did it. However, only recently, like at the time of this recording, only a few weeks ago, the Wii version of it is now dumped online for the first time ever. People can go play it. There's videos now. You can watch people play it. But of course, it's the Wii version, so I have no interest in that build. If the 360 version ever gets leaked, I'll be all over that. But the Wii version apparently doesn't even run on Wii hardware. You have to really only use it on a PC using emulators and stuff, so it's like really not anything I'm interested in playing that way. But the idea, like, I really wish that game had actually come out, because I think that would have been a very interesting trajectory for LucasArts in general. And I think there's a better chance that the EA version of Star Wars Battlefront wouldn't have either ever existed, or at least maybe would have been forced to stick to that formula more. I genuinely don't know. But that is my number one, like, game that was canceled that I wish had been released. And as for games that got released that I wish had been canceled, I operate more by the logic I said before, where I feel like the number one reason to cancel a game or to wish a game had been canceled, even though it was released, is in the event that you feel that game caused overall brand damage and maybe ended a franchise. Using the reverse logic of this, I will tell you right now, as an avid Shenmue fan, that if Shenmue 2 had never been released, and Shenmue 1 was just this one game that had come out one time back on the Dreamcast, it would have been a thing that only guys like me remember. They're like, oh yeah, remember that one game? It never had a sequel or anything, because it would never have had the same type of appeal. The ending of Shenmue 2 left you so, like, craven for another entry that's eventually what led to Shenmue 3. But if the first one had been good, but just kind of whatever, then it never would have done that. And I feel like that's what happened with the Star Wars Force Unleashed franchise. Did you guys ever play those games? Star Wars Force Unleashed?
Yes.
No, I haven't. None of the Star Wars in general.
That's fine. I know it makes it sound like based on my answers, that's all I care about, but those are the answers that came to my mind. Star Wars Force Unleashed 1 for the 360 and PS3, I think is like one of the greatest games in that generation. It's amazing. Like, as long as you detach it in a lot of ways from canon Star Wars, it's just a really fun action game that uses the IP. It tells an interesting side story. It has some really good acting in it. It's just an overall fun gaming experience, setting aside if you like Star Wars or not. But of course, if you do like Star Wars, it's more interesting. And for a bit there, it was one of the only canonical, because it's not canon anymore, but canonical stories that took place in between episodes 3 and 4. And it was a really, really fun game. But because it was also a big success of a game, they eventually decided to make a sequel, and logically so. But they kind of wanted to rush it, and I've heard mixed reports that maybe it was this franchise that also really hurt Star Wars Battlefront, and maybe that's why that series ended, was because of this game, which might explain the other answer. But anyway, so they basically were trying to rush a sequel into production, and I watched an entire like mini doc on this, and basically one of the team leads was like, we only have this much time to do it, and we think we need this much time, meaning he wanted like another year. And he was like, if we don't have that, then realistically the best we're ever going to get is like a 5 out of 10 type of game. And if you ever play the sequel, it is a 5 out of 10 game. It's not nearly as engaging. It's not that interesting. It retreads a lot of story points. It doesn't make much sense. And it didn't add anything. And it didn't even feel like a good DLC. It just was like content for content's sake. And there was never an attempt at a third game. To my knowledge, they never were interested in producing one. There's almost no fan demand for one either. I never hear people say like, oh, I'd love to see a third one of those. And I solely believe that is because Force Unleashed 2 was just so meh that people just got bored of it. Like if it had really truly sucked in like a legendary type of way, at least there would be memes or something out of it. And if it had been really good, we'd all be craving for it. But having it just be like as mid as possible, then yeah, I think that's probably why that is. So I feel like that's a game I wish had been canceled, because even if we never got a second one, at least we'd be sitting out there like constantly wondering what if, and not, be like, oh, that's right, there was a second one and it sucked, That's my thoughts.
Yeah, it's I do see kind of how your thought of the second one kind of poisoning the well, as it were, being meh or divisive at best. It's I went back and I tried playing those games recently, and maybe it's just like franchise fatigue for Star Wars. Like I don't remember it feeling that way back in the day, but the whole premise of the games and everything ended up just feeling really, really fanficky to me. Like, oh, Darth Vader's got like an apprentice and he's a total badass, and like I get there's a lot of internet love for Sam Witwer, the actor behind Starkiller, and and he ended up going on to do like Darth Maul and Star Wars Rebels and Clone Wars, and he's a major part of the franchise now and beloved by many people. But it just seemed like a little overblown, and maybe it was shifting tastes that maybe wanted something a bit more grounded. Like there was that Star Wars game that was also around that time, but was it the 1313? Was that the other one?
Yeah,
that got
the one
canceled?
that never got released. It was also canceled. Yeah.
Yeah, so like maybe they just saw the writing on the wall and maybe saw the public's taste shift to more of like a grounded, gritty Star Wars game, as opposed to this guy being able to pull Star Destroyers out of the sky using the Force kind of thing.
It's definitely a fanfic game. I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
But it's not even canon. I mean, it was briefly before Disney, but it's like I said, it's just kind of Star Wars extreme. Like I don't know if you ever saw those toys that they did. It's like that as a video game, and I think that was actually something of the origin of it. But yeah, no, I'm just saying that I feel that the second game's thud of a landing is the reason there has no demand for a third one. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, if it had been a critical and commercial success as big as the first game, I'm sure there would have been a third one. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, well.
Oh, well.
Any other thoughts on this?
No, I'm good.
All right, then we will move on. Thank you, Abdullah, for that. Our last subject comes from Spencer Puryear, who is, of course, able to pick a subject. And he wanted us, and this is kind of nice fitting in here, he wanted us to talk about franchises that we wanted that turned out awful. So this can either be sequels or it can be entirely new franchises. Like if you saw ads for an entirely new game and you were all like, oh man, I've never heard of this thing. This would be cool. You play it and you're like, wow, this sucked. Anything like that. Who would like to go first?
So I guess it came down to like first impressions, especially, and just the taste of me at the time, and coupled with expectations. But the game for me that really did that was No Man's Sky, when that came out in like 2016 or whatever for the PS4.
Yeah,
I was so hyped for that game, like everybody was. and I know it's been well documented, the development problems that the game went through, and not being open and honest about the game and its capabilities to consumers beforehand. But yeah, I remember playing that game and I was just like, wow, this is it, huh? I think I did 2 or 3 planets, and then I ended up trading it in the next day for it. The irony is that because of the work that the developers put into fixing that game, expanding upon it and improving upon it in every way, shape, or form since then, that game is generally regarded as a masterpiece now. But I never went back to it. I've never re-bought that game and or downloaded the DLC or whatever, just because it was I was once burned, twice shy about the game at that point. And then also, I think I realized, and I've really come to understand this about my own tastes, is that I'm liking giant open world games less and less now as I get older. I want a tight, focused story game, as opposed to go over there and climb that mountain and and go even further and climb that mountain. I don't like those types of games anymore. Maybe if that game had launched in a perfect state as it is now, maybe I would have been so inspired and blown away that that I would still have a deeper appreciation for those games. But No Man's Sky, in the broken, sad state that it launched in, plus my evolving taste towards smaller games, really doomed it. Doomed the whole genre for me. To the point that when Starfield came out, I didn't really play that. I played Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but that's the biggest game, the extent that I've played in a very, very long time. So, yeah, that'd be my answer.
All right, Abdullah, how about you?
So for this one, I don't know if it counts, but it's still part of the Sonic series. That's just my theme today, I guess. It's more of a spin-off game, kind of a spin-off game. That turned out very, very bad. It was awful. Which is at this time, it's probably very controversial to say, but you guys know the Shadow the Hedgehog 2005 game?
Oh,
yes,
you're gonna
the one with the gun.
Some people.
Yeah. So right now, the Sonic X Shadow Generations. Now that's an amazing game. I love it. I love the way they did it. They kind of fixed whatever happened in that game, I guess. But that game by itself was a hell of a mess of a game, and I think it's as awful as a spin-off could get. That's from what I experienced in the game, even when I replay it now. I think it had a very interesting premise. It had a very high premise, the whole being for mature audiences more than it's being for Sonic is for kids and all that. Tried to give the series a whole new side. And I think the way it came out, the game, how buggy it was, how Shadow was so slippery during the game, the multiple storylines makes you hella confused with what is actually canon versus what is not. All of that kind of piled up together, and at that time, it was during the beginning of Sonic's quote unquote bad or rough era. So I think that game deserves to be called a bad game in general. Now I'm linked to it. I like the reasons I like it are mostly because it's from my childhood, but as a game, no, it's awful. The controls, even the whole plot gets confusing and everything. It kind of even messes up the series somehow. But all of that can be forgotten with the whole new game that's been released now, the Shadow Generations portion at least. I haven't seen anything about the movie though, so I have no idea. I can't talk about that.
Okay, so it's funny. I actually remember playing that game when it came out. I remember thinking it was like okay, but I will admit I have no desire to ever revisit it. I remember thinking it was fine, but yeah, that was 20 years ago. So like,
and it gets annoying with this. I remember as a kid when my brother and I were playing, is that we played and we just reached the goal. It's kind of like that's what we're programmed to do with Sonic, right? We don't have to do the missions. We don't care about them, and we end up just going through a cycle, a loop, the same story until we say, okay, something is wrong. We know that Sonic or whatever Shadow has to transform, or there's supposed to be some sort of final story. Until we figured out that you have to do the missions, and don't want to get into the whole Lost Impact mission. I think it's Lost Impact or something. That's the stage name. It's the Maria mission. It's one of the worst in the game. That's kind of like childhood video game trauma for me. I remember not being able to ever finish that mission.
Alright.
So that's pretty much what I have in terms of I would guess a spin-off that turned out awful in 2005, but they did well in 2024. So
that's fine. It's a franchise you were excited about, or a game you were excited about that turned out awful. So I've said this a million times about how much I hated Twisted Metal 3, so I'm not going to do that again. But one, that if we stick with the theme, because, Abdullah stuck with Sonic, I'll stick with Star Wars. When we eventually did get a new Battlefront game, and then I found out it was going to be EA, I knew immediately it was going to suck. Like, I just knew that. And then I was like, ugh, I'm going to give it a shot anyway, because I want it to be good. I want to believe that somehow they'll do this right. And of course they didn't. It was like an online only piece of crap, and like it was just totally terrible. And I was like, yep, called it. At least for the EA Battlefront 2, they had a single player mode, but it was only like 3 hours of content, and that mode was like playable. I played it through like once, and I was like, all right, this is worth $5. But that was about it. I think I have the PS4 version of it still. But no, it was not. That was disappointing. That was like a perfect lesson in like hyper capitalism, by the way, because like you basically create an IP within an IP, and it's really good. It builds up a lot of goodwill. It gets a sequel, and it gets even better, and then they get people clamoring for it, and then everything about the people and the entity that created it is purchased. So LucasArts no longer existed. They were shut down by Disney. And Disney itself had absorbed Star Wars. So in no way was Lucasfilm actually creating a new Star Wars game. The brand was gone. But now the developers behind it, Pandemic, no longer had anything to do with it. LucasArts, who oversaw them, had nothing to do with it. It was made by EA, and specifically DICE overseeing them. So all three parties creating this overrode the wishes and intents of the originals, if you get what I'm saying. And the reason they picked Battlefront specifically is because it had the highest demand for a sequel, but that's all they cared about was the name, to the point where they rebranded it as EA Battlefront, and they got rid of the sequelization. They're like, we don't care about the old ones, we'll wipe those out of continuity, they never happened, blah blah blah. And then they're like, let's also take, as you pointed to earlier, modern concepts, things that Fortnite popularized, and let's inject those into an established thing, and let's utterly destroy this in a way that absolutely no one will like. And then they did Battlefront 2, which also had all that drama around it, and you remember that, like that after that game was like famously a flop because of all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, and then they killed that franchise like almost permanently, because now there are probably more people who associate Star Wars Battlefront as a bad thing than a good thing, and you can thank that to EA. So that, but say that I was like super excited about it would not be correct, because I knew they would screw it up, because it's EA. I can't think of an example of them not screwing something up. I admit I liked, what was that, the one they did? Star Wars, not the most recent one, not Jedi Outcast or whatever it was, but the one before it. Do you remember?
Jedi Survivor, or no?
It was one of the. I think it's the one that's before that. I mean, I've played it before. It was good. I actually liked that game. It wasn't great. It was kind of like Assassin's Creed Star Wars, but it was, I liked it. It was fine.
I liked the Star Wars Squadrons game a little bit.
Like that.
Because I love Rogue Squadron. Like, that's my favorite Star Wars game, especially the one on GameCube.
I wanted to like that too for that reason.
But I was actually really disappointed when I found out that you couldn't do third person, like out of cockpit views. It's like it was the entirely cockpit view game, and I was like, man, I want to see my ship. I wanted to make it like Rogue Squadron.
Right, you wanted to play a different game, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
That's another thing. We never got the proper Rogue Squadron sequel again because of this stuff. And to throw Abdullah a bone here, this doesn't really count because I wasn't excited for it when it came out, but I was excited for it when I got my hands on it. To talk Sonic stuff, if you familiar with your Sega 32X, there is no Sonic game on that system. There's only Knuckles Chaotix.
Knuckles.
There's only Knuckles. There's only Knuckles Chaotix. And so if this was, you have to understand, I got that game probably in like 2002, maybe 2001. So the internet was not what it is now. There was no like YouTube to like look up reviews. There was no history of video. All I knew was that if I got a 32X, I could try this one Sonic game I had never played. And so I eventually managed to get it, and I put it in, and it was like one of the worst things ever. It's terrible. I hated it. Like I just hated it. And so that of all Sonic games, I think that's the one that really was like, wow. Like of ones where I'm expecting something out of it. Like I would have known going into like, I don't know, like Tails' Adventure for Game Gear, not to expect much, or whatever. But going into like what I thought was a mainline franchise Sonic game, even though Sonic himself was not the lead, I just expected it to be good by default, and it wasn't. It was terrible. But
it was terrible, even though Knuckles was pretty famous and pretty popular back then.
It was just, what kills me too is like there was no reason it had to be bad. Like they tried this stupid mechanic where you're like roping two characters together, and that really just didn't make it work. It was like they were trying to make Sonic Mania before Sonic Mania, but they didn't know how to do it. They just didn't know how to do it. And that was the result. So there you go. Any other thoughts on this? Anybody got anything?
No.
We're good.
No. All right. Well, then that will do it here. So thank you very much to Spencer for picking that subject. And of course, earlier, thank you, Lodmot, for having joined us. Sinjeet for the subject you picked as well. Shout outs to Jeb Malcolm, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, Tim Inman, Trey Wagner. Abdullah, obviously, thank you for being here. And Rob, it's all right that you're here, but don't make it too regular, all right?
Oh, I don't plan on it.
That's good. I don't want that. Appreciate it. In all seriousness, though, thank you, everybody, for listening. We appreciate you. Again, if you could like the video, comment down below, subscribe if you've never done that before. We appreciate that. And check out all the social media stuff. We got Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, Spreadshirt, and my travel channel. I appreciate the support on all those platforms. Thank you so much, and we'll see you all later.